Now, not everything is just that clean. What if I had an organization that recorded their sales transaction? We'll stay with the Canadian dollar, right? So they record all of their sales transactions, but they don't do that translation at the time of the transaction date. They only do it periodically. So, for example, they only do it once a month. So, at the end of every month, they take a look at all of their Canadian transactions and then they do the translation. Well, what if you have millions and millions of Canadian transactions where your customers are paying you in the Canadian dollar? Now, it seems far-fetched, but let's just take it to its extreme case. So, this company doesn't translate daily. They translate monthly. And we'll stay with the Canadian dollars. And during the month, they had recorded all of these sales, assuming they were going to receive only Canadian dollars. And we'll keep it kind of simple. They did 10, not dollars, Canadian dollars. They did $10 million in Canadian dollar sales, and they did sales every single day throughout the month. Now, and this represented close to 100 different transactions. So it's 100 different trades. I know this is redundant, but sometimes I get a little too wordy. 100 transactions. So you're the accountant. Do you really want to go in? It may not be practical for you to go in because of the way they've set up their system and figure out, well, what is our U.S. sales for this 10 million Canadian dollar sales, and how much am I owed at this moment in time, right? So this is a little bit of a difficulty, but it can occur. So what would you do? Well, you could go in and figure out each day and do the translation adjustment. Or the literature also allows you to use an average. Okay? An average exchange rate. Assuming that this happened evenly throughout the period of time. That gets tricky, especially if we're dealing with a company where they have seasonality and this $10 million isn't done evenly throughout the period of time. So I might have to factor in seasonality and not just an average exchange rate, but it might have to be a weighted average exchange rate, possibly weighted. So it does allow for this. So we would go in and we'd take a look. We're not going to go through and do all the math on this, but we would go in and we'd take a look at the month of June, and we take a look at what is our weighted average. So I'm going to take this, convert all of these exchange rates to direct exchange rates, and now I'm going to get the average of my exchange rates during the month of June. And I would see that my average exchange rate is 0.737941. And so I could then take that by my 10 million and I would recognize what my revenue is on that day. I wouldn't have any exchange rate gains or losses because I didn't initially record these items. I didn't record this initial $10 million. I didn't initially record it at the US equivalent. So I'd have $10 million. We're making an assumption here that all of this $10 million has still not been collected. We've got all this $10 million. We're just going to recognize the sales on an average basis, assuming that these sales occurred evenly throughout the period of time. And we can also make an assumption here, well, how much did the exchange rate really vary during this period of time? Maybe this makes the most sense to do this. If we believe that, one of these sales represented a large percentage, then maybe we'd have to do a weighted average exchange rate. But don't just think that each one of these things is always going to be translated on the day of the transaction. Sometimes there's a delay, and they may do it on a monthly basis. They may actually do these translations monthly. Not saying it's always going to happen that way, but that could be the process that they utilize.